Coming soon on Newswire L.A., an exclusive look inside of the City of Los Angeles Bureau of Street Lighting.
Let me talk about our LED program. Our LED program is to convert 140,000 streetlights in the city. I mentioned earlier we have 210,000 streetlights in the city. So there's about 70,000 streetlights that are not the modern style Cobra heads.
It was referred to as according to wattage because that was the standard. But now we grade everything by how many LEDs are in it. And depending on the technology, you could have one with less LEDs and with right next to one that has more LEDs and be the same amount of light output because of the technology.
How many LEDs are we using in Los Angeles?
The typical residential is right now we're using a 30 LED, which is equivalent to a 100 watt HPS or 100 watt high pressure sodium light, which is basically what they're pulling down today.
How much energy are these things pulling?
Approximately 50% less.
And what's the life on these bulbs? Or these units, I should say.
These units, they're approximately an 8 to 10 year.
Stay tuned for more news on this Westlake Signal station. And now, a Newswire L.A. editorial. The recent Occupy movement came about as the result of the feeling that the current system of democratic government is no longer effective. People no longer believe that casting a ballot affects any change, so they're turning out in the streets to have their voices heard instead. Newswire L.A. did some research, and we're finding that our system of government actually can be saved if we do a few things. This editorial is a look at what we, the voters, must do to keep one of the most effective systems of government on earth alive. We paid a visit to the Los Angeles City Clerk's office and looked at the certified data for the most recent election held on March 8, 2011. Do you know there are 1,644,647 registered voters inside the city limits? Yet on March 8th, only 267,340 ballots were cast. That shakes out to only 14% of all registered voters going to the polls. If you factor out the LA Unified and the LA Community College District elections, you find that you can drop that total by 1% to a total of 13%. 13% of the voters made decisions that affected a silent majority of 87%. How is that allowed to happen? Well, we believe there are three major reasons. First, the vast majority of silent voters believe their votes mean nothing in this system. Many of those people made up this past year's Occupy movement. Two, others say they don't have the time to deal with politics. Their own lives have to come first. Finally, you have an electorate who is uneducated when it comes to how the system works. Additionally, when election time rolls around, little or no time is devoted to getting to know the candidates or the issues. Let's visit these observations one by one. First, there are the silent voters. Citing our earlier data from the clerk's office, the silent voters made up a mammoth 87% of the voters in LA City. On March 8th, if that 87% or 1.5 million voters cast ballots in that election, they could have affected the direction of this city in a major way. During every election cycle, there are movements to get more voters out and to pull silent voters out of the shadows. Remember, the choice to act is yours. If you feel the best course of action is to simply drop out, that's fine, but be aware that other people are making decisions for you that affect your life. Second, there are people who don't have time. All of us are living in a time when we're working longer hours and caring for more family members. The system knows this, and that's why most information is available via the internet. That information can be downloaded in PDF form, or it can just be read right on the screen. The average person spends 8 hours per week surfing the internet. Why not use one or more of those hours to do something that is truly beneficial? In some counties, you can electronically vote at precincts, but the generally accepted method is the absentee ballot. The ballot is mailed to your home within a 3-week window of the election. All you have to do is take the previously marked sample ballot and transcribe your choices to a Scantron or punch card. A 45-cent stamp will send that ballot on its way back to the city or county clerk's office, where it will be counted. Finally, and we've arrived at the most complex and damning observation, the lack of knowledge by the electorate. This problem is systemic. Beginning more than a decade ago, courses such as history and civics were de-emphasized in favor of filling the achievement gaps in reading and math. According to a June 2011 article by the Lexington Institute, the report goes on to state that only 1/4, or 25% of American students scored at or above proficiency in their grasp of U.S. history. An abysmal performance came from high school seniors, with only 12% achieving proficiency or higher. The scores among minority candidates were also abysmally low. This de-emphasis of history and government gained traction in the early 1990s. Today's generation, those who make up a majority of the Occupy movement, represent those cited in the Lexington Institute article. As for the rest of us who've decided that all we need to know about a candidate or an issue we can find in a mailer or in a commercial, well, we have to point out to you just how devastating that is. Commercials and mailers are designed to enhance a candidate or an issue in their favor. They are also used to demonize the opposing side, sometimes using skewed or questionable data. What about candidates and initiatives who don't have the funding for elaborate media and mailing campaigns? Are those candidates less qualified than those who can afford slick mailers and commercials? No, not in the least. Commercials and mailers don't tell you the whole story about the candidates or the initiatives. Let me cite some of the bond measures that have been voted into existence over the past 20 years or so. Let's say we vote to implement Measure A, which is designed as a school improvement bond. All we have to do is okay the issuance of $200 million in general obligation bonds. Those bonds will mature in 20 years. It sounds good, right? If that state or municipality is in dire straits like we are now, they risk going into default. The only recourse is to add fees and surcharges onto the weary electorate. Sadly, all of this could have been avoided by having an electorate that voted more with their heads than with their hearts. As we conclude this editorial, I want to cite one more section of the 2011 Lexington Institute article. The report stated that half or more of teenagers were not adequately prepared to identify a single right protected by the First Amendment, or to recognize that the U.S. Constitution proclaims that government's authority is based on the people's consent, and their consent only. Newswire L.A. says that observation just doesn't apply to teenagers. It applies to each and every one of us who have fallen short in our knowledge of government. In this election season, let's make a stride to change that, and make some real change by going to the ballot box and making informed choices. I'm Chin Thomasangsi, and Newswire L.A. appreciates your comments. You can post written comments or a rebuttal video on our Newswire L.A. Facebook page. The best of those could be used in a future broadcast or rebuttal segment. You can also send us comments via our email system. Use this address, newswirela@gmail.com. Comments and videos must adhere to general broadcast standards for content and language. Newswire L.A. reserves the right to remove content that does not adhere to these standards. Thank you for joining us, and this concludes our broadcast day.